going, but it's in the right of way to take it. So I don't know what we can do.
Let me answer that. There are two operations going on with regard to tree cutting. One is the one that the county is doing in the recovery effort, and the other is the one Bluebonnet Electric is doing. And ours is primary, as the county's is primary. Well, we're only cutting trees that are not going to make it, and I'll expand on that in just a minute. Bluebonnet is cutting trees that aren't going to make it. But then in addition, if you recall the ad that Bluebonnet ran in the paper for some time, they offered out to people that if you have other trees on your property that are outside of our, typically their easement is 30 feet centered on their overhead electric. So what Bluebonnet had offered is for those that wanted to, homeowners that wanted to, they would come into their property and do some additional tree removal on their property. So some of that is going on with Bluebonnet's crews. Now, do what? Yeah, that threatened their line, okay? Now, what we did, we sat down with the Forest Service, and we had the Forest Service come up with a criteria for us on cutting trees on the county's operation. And here's the other thing. We know that we're going to make probably three passes, maybe 4 passes through this whole area before we're finished. And so what we did is we sat down with the Forest Service and we said, give us some criteria. And so our cutters are using specific criteria. I can't say it verbatim, but here's part of it. If the tree is charred around the entire circumference of the tree and it goes up at least 50% of the height of the trunk and there's no green in it, then that tree is going to die or is dead. And it's a threat to safety, we cut it down. If it has any green in it, they're leaving it. Now, the reality is most of the ones that we are leaving that have green in it are not going to make it. And that's not me saying that, that's the Forest Service. The challenge is these trees were stressed to begin with because of the drought, then they went through the fire, and now with the projected drought that's going to be ongoing, most of these trees aren't going to make it. Now, the one you're talking about may make it because it's getting extra TLC. Yeah. Yeah, and so what happens is, like I said, there's 2 operations out there. We are doing everything we can do to only cut the trees that aren't going to survive. Now, Bluebonnet has a different responsibility. They have to cut trees. They will cut trees that are green that threaten their line, particularly if it's within their easement area. They will cut it, and then if it's outside of that area and the property owner gives them permission to cut it, it could be a perfectly healthy tree, and they will cut that tree to remove the threat to their power line.
Okay. To kind of have a little blurb to that, this afternoon we have several sessions where we have the natural resource experts here addressing the properties, I guess, not in the right of way. We also have a long-term recovery committee, and we're working with Logs to Lumber to try to get some of the timber that is not salvageable cut into timber, get it dried, and reused in a process of the unmet needs folks that are going to be rebuilding. So we're going to be trying to recycle some of that lumber or timber. Okay, I have a question.
Actually, I had 2 questions. One was about the trees. Is there any service that is volunteering, like say A&M or anybody that is coming out to observe or go walk through with your property to assess your trees with you? Also, on our street alone, there were several properties that were questionable, I think owned by banks or foreclosed, that are burnt. I'm wondering when or if there is going to be anyone taking care of those properties, clearing them out. So one of them is a corner lot that's a very big eyesore. I don't want that to be there forever. I'm just wondering who is following up on those, and people that have moved away, are they taking care of cleaning up their property, or is that going to be property that is just left alone?
I'm sorry.
I live on Pine Tree Loop.
Were you here when I answered this one's question?
I didn't. I'm right here, yes. Yes.
Oh.
I just didn't know about any actual homes that were not. Yeah, I didn't.
Yeah, it's the same answer.
Okay. All right.
At some point, we will have to do something about that, but we want to give them the opportunity to do it themselves instead of rushing in.
Right, I was just wondering about, I thought that was with, homes that just want to.
Ma'am, and I'd also like to respond to the second part of your question. I can only speak to the portion of the fire that was inside the city, but we're in a period of transition now, as Mr. Moore has gone over. But after we finish this portion of transition, the city has numerous public nuisance ordinances and things of this nature. So if a property owner fails to clean up his property after the transition period, we will be following up on them and following on them for public nuisance to get that property cleaned up.
And let me add one thing to that, because a lot of you may not realize this. Home rule cities such as the city of Bastrop are self-governing. They can make an ordinance that says every house on this street has to be painted blue. And
Wouldn't go that far.
but cities are self-governing if they're home rule. Counties are not self-governing. County government is an extension of state government. We only have the authority that it is granted by the state, and we can only enforce what the legislature allows us to enforce. And so we cannot make laws. We can't make rules outside of what the legislature has granted us to do. So cities have a whole lot more authority and powers to deal with the issues you're talking about than we do. We can't, and that's just the way it is, and it's always been that way. In every legislative session, there's an attempt to grant counties more authority, but it never passes. Some of you probably have been through this, where you moved out in the country, got you a great place, and then somebody bought the place next to you and did something you didn't like. You know, and we have no land use controls, and so we can do it under. The public nuisance is actually the Texas Health and Safety Code for us, where cities can have their own ordinances and laws that they create.
To your first question on the trees, we have an environmental task force that has a significant amount of resources available. Roxanne Hernandez, I believe, was in the room a second ago. Afterwards, they've produced some information for landowners for guidance in terms of reseeding recommendations, trees to see, to assess the trees. It's a wonderful set of resources that I'm sure are available in this room somewhere.
They're in the lobby.
Okay, I had to cancel here.
My question is for Blue Bonnet also, that has to do with the trees. I have had a lot of dealings with Blue Bonnet, and they've all been actually pretty good. But my question about this is that I have several very healthy trees on a very otherwise unhealthy lot, and of course they were going to cut them down because they were within 10 feet of the power line. So I said, okay, what are my options? My options were to move the pole, or to, move the pole. That's just about it. Or else cut the trees down. So I had them salvage the trees or save them until we could get an engineer out there. The engineer came, and he said it was fine, and then someone else came and said it wasn't fine. Well, I had to ask for this. This was not offered to me, but if I were to bury my cable from the street to the house, then I could save all those trees and probably save the possibility of having it happen again with somebody else's tree or my trees falling on the line. And apparently Blue Bonnet does this, but it's extremely expensive. Now I'm having my contractor do it, and it ain't cheap doing it that way either, not at all. But at least it's an option for saving some of the trees, because I'm taking TLC with several of my trees right now. I have a whole acre.
We have about 3 minutes left. Here.
A question for Dick regarding the wastewater out in Tahitian. I have 2 duplexes that are gone now, and one of them had 2 grinder pumps and sewer hookups.